without further ado, I want to introduce Anna-Chiara, who, in the interest of being global and hearing where everyone's from, is an Italian living in London. So welcome, Anna-Chiara. She is a product manager at Google on the Android team, working primarily on Jetpack Compose and the Compose 1.0 launch, which we're going to hear a little bit about today. She's been a developer for over 2 decades, so she's done everything from writing code to managing technical teams. And we're really, really excited to have her here. I know, Anna-Chiara, you're really looking forward to sharing some of your insights and knowledge, and we're really excited to hear a little bit about a developer tool that I know will be the future of Android, I hope. So thank you for joining us. And yeah, I'll just hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rosa. I have to say that the honor is absolutely mine. I am really excited to be here. In part because I love talking about Compose. It's been a long time in the making. It's a project that took us over 4 years from inception to release. So it's been a long time in the making, really, but also because I'm really passionate in general about talent and helping talent grow or just learn new things. That's really a passion of mine, learning, teaching, both sides of it. So it's just a great pleasure to be here. So I guess I'll just get ahead. So Jetpack Compose 1.0, this is the big news. So we are on September 1st. So Jetpack Compose has released a little over a month ago. So in July, on July 28th. And I hope you as Android developers have heard about it. If not, what is it? It's Android's native UI toolkit, modern native UI toolkit for building apps, for building UIs in a powerful way, in an intuitive way, with much, much less code, and with a very intuitive Kotlin API. And today I'm going to focus on a couple of things. So that it's a declarative UI toolkit, and what does that mean for you? And how we got to an intuitive Kotlin API, because you can find already a lot of documentation around. And what I want to give you is a bit of a glimpse into actually how we got here and what were some of the things that we did to get to this result, and some of the results that actually we're having, and some of the feedback that we're getting from the community. So how does Compose look like? I don't know how many of you have already experienced writing UIs in general with Android. But if you have tried with the view system to build this very little demo, it's nothing complicated, you'll know that it takes a lot of code to write something like this. There are layout XMLs, there are resources to load, there are animations, and they have been very difficult with the old toolkit. So what is the reason? The reason is that the old toolkit, this is when it started. This is how UIs looked like when the old toolkit started. And this is more or less how maps would look like. This is actually the UI from Google Maps in 2010. So 11 years ago, this was just 1 year into Android development. And this is how it looked. And you can imagine that a system built to support this kind of UI, scaling it to this, that hasn't been easy, okay? So the result of that is that while the view system is comprehensive and allows you to do amazing things, it's still very big, and it's really hard to maintain, even for us. So just to give you an idea, view.java is a file that has something like 30,000 lines of code. Like, GitHub says, no, sorry, you can't really look at this file. Can you imagine what does it mean for our engineers? Just, okay, let's go and fix a bug in Vue. That's a huge undertaking. So it was the time to do something new. It was the time to fast forward a lot into modern development. We know that there are a lot of frameworks like React or like Litho and others that have paved the way for declarative UI development. And we're going to talk a bit about that. So what does it mean that Compose is declarative? If you are familiar with classical Android development, you know that there is an XML layout. So if you want to put a text, and you're going to have to put a text view and a button inside the linear layout, and everything is declared into an XML layout. Brilliant. And then in the activity, you know the ID of the view, you have to go and find it, and then you have to programmatically set the text, set if you want it visible, and then you have, like, if you want to programmatically build your UI, this is how you operate with it. So the state is completely enmeshed with how you build your UI. And the problem is that part of the state is in the XML, part is in the code, and part is in all of the other views, and then there is all this communication. Now, what happens when state changes? It is really difficult, and this is one of the things that has traditionally made Android development difficult. So if any one of you is studying and has found view system a bit complicated, you're not alone. It is complicated. It is difficult. As I said, that's how it evolved. It evolved from a very different system and very different capabilities of the devices. So there is a reason, but there is also a moment. It is also the moment to move forward. So declarative frameworks actually limit something. They don't allow this back and forth that we're seeing here, where state is on one side and state is on the other side. This cannot happen in a declarative UI framework. In a declarative UI framework, there is state, and state is pushed to the UI. It is absolutely unidirectional. You cannot modify the UI without changing state. So all you do is you have a state, you get a UI. You have a second state, and you will have a second UI. And this is the only direction in which you can update your UI. How does this look like in practice? So this is just, and this is, by the way, all the code that you need to emit UI in Compose. You don't have those XML files, you don't have anything else, because it's the framework that will take care of updating. So what you see here is just a function that says, like, okay, I want to create a message list. And all I do is pass the state as a parameter. So this messages, this list of messages, this list of strings is the state that I pass in. And as you can see, inside, there is no memorization, there is no what happens when I update the state, go and update the text. There is nothing like that. There is just a declarative way in saying, in this column, just for each message, emit some text, and this is the text that you will emit. It is pretty magical once you try. It is very, very difficult to show just in a presentation, but it is really, really, really that simple. The great thing is that the famous, okay, what happens when you don't have messages? It is as simple as this. It's a simple if. And you can see the big difference with any kind of framework that is non-declarative. It is very different because in other cases you would have had, okay, so if the message counter goes to 1, then change the text to the message, or there's always an event handling that you have to manage. And in this case, there is no event handling. You just declare, you just say, this is how my UI should look like, and Compose will take care of the rest. And this is how you declare some state that you want to observe, which means just this list of messages using view model. So there are you can use all the Jetpack libraries that you're familiar with. So with view model, just observe a state, and this is just all you have to do to integrate view model with Compose. And here, you don't have to change anything. Your composable is completely independent of your view model. And this is just really, really, really magical, I have to say. Rosa before said, I've been a developer for all my life, basically. And I had tried Android development. I didn't find it particularly friendly. I did other things in my life. I was never a professional Android development, but when I tried, I found it particularly difficult. When I tried Compose, honestly, I didn't find it difficult, and actually, I contributed to some of the samples that you can see online. And even working with checkbox, there is no update that you have to manually go in there. Okay, I'm going to update the tick of the checkbox. No, you just describe how the checkbox has to look like, what is the state, and then When it changes, as you can see, you do not change the checkbox itself, but you will just change your state, which is this select all. I'm going to skip pretty quickly through this. What is important is that you just describe your UI for a given state. And again, really, really magical. The framework does all the updates. So one of the things that is important is that the code that you write is not all the code that will be executed. And this is pretty important because in a way, you can see that we take away part of this control from you, like, oh, but I want exactly to go and update that pixel. We give you different ways of expressing how you want every pixel to look like, but we take away all the boilerplate of doing all the piping and the wiring. So one of the things that we are particularly proud of is that we have heard from many developers that the API is very intuitive and they just find it really, really, really easy. And how did we do that? This slide, I put it here because to me it's very important. Compose has been written completely as an open source project. So we actually open sourced it in 2019. So it was about 2 years in the making, but it was still very, very early days when we announced it. And what matters is that, by the way, you can just check that link to see the sources. It's very important because this has allowed us to work with the community, to get feedback very early on, rather than developing a product internally. Obviously, we have amazing engineers and they have amazing ideas, but instead of just having, a number of Google engineers building it, we have extensively worked with the community, and we have kept this project. I said at the beginning, it's been a long time in the making. For over 2 years, it has been open sourced before becoming stable. Why was that? It was because we really wanted this iteration with the community. And this is, you can't see me, but I'm actually behind on the left at the end with the gray sweater. Those are mine. This was a workshop where we were just ingesting feedback from our team. And here we're working with user experience designers. I know it sounds particular, something that I didn't know before joining Google, but there's a lot of UX design in designing APIs. It seems weird because we think that user experience or UI design is more about UI again, and instead we worked a lot with our user experience and researchers just on how did we design the API. And here we were working together as a team, trying to ingest and working on our samples and trying to understand, okay, what is the best way to communicate Compose? What shapes should our API have, and all of that. And this is some of the feedback that we received. And we're particularly proud because this is feedback that we received thanks to this strict, very close collaboration with the community. We worked with some partners for many times, and they bore all the pain of an API that was changing under the feet constantly, honestly. Like, we were changing things and breaking their code every week, but they were super patient with us. And the things that we like is that in the end, they were able to support exactly the things that we want to say about Compose that we wanted to say. So we wanted to make a simple product. And most of our partners have told us, yes, it's very simple. And things that were very complicated in use have become so easy. And one thing that we're particularly happy is that they say it's fun. And personally, I can confirm that. I hope that many of you will go ahead and try it, and you will let us know if you find it fun. I think it is. I think development is real fun, especially when the tools are really aligned with the way you think and your APIs are aligned with the way you think. I think it's really fun, and we're happy to see that. And one thing that is super important, like, we all want to be productive. Okay, development is fun, but we're doing it as a job very often, and spending time. If things are just very time-consuming to make, it is not super fun, right? So for us, so just knowing that really it is faster, so there is a closer connection between what you think and what you're able to produce, just makes developer more productive. And one thing that we know was big pain. or animations, like animations in the view system. Some things people don't even try. It's like, no, like designer, forget it. But UIs are much more dynamic. People want to express more things and there is more motion. Our devices have bigger capabilities. They have bigger screens. We want those animations. We want them to be subtle or we want them to be bold, but they can be difficult. And as developers, it is tough. And this is really one of the best results is that animations are so much easier. They're just really simple. It's incredibly simple. And another thing that is really interesting is that Compose allows you to write UIs for many different form factors. We always think about phones, like say Android phone, but actually Android apps and written in Compose, they work extremely well on tablets or on Chromebooks and even on wear watches. So there is a work in progress. If you follow us, there is work in progress. It's already open sourced to see like how where can support Compose, how you can use Compose to build wear apps. So lots of exciting things, really. These are some of the resources, of the links that you can follow. So the first one is particularly important. The Compose pathway has a ton of learning resources. As I said, I personally have a strong interest in both teaching and learning. And for me, as a product manager, this very close collaboration, this with the community, all this feedback that we're able to get from the community is super important. And obviously, this is not just my doing. I work with an amazing team that has put together just more learning resources than I could ever even think. But there's really a lot, and there are also different styles. So if you are a visual learner, you prefer videos, there are videos. Otherwise, if you prefer to be hands-on, you can just, open a code lab and start writing. Or if you just want to look at samples, we have plenty of samples, documentation, a Slack community, and where you can join and talk directly to our engineers. Like the people that you have seen in the picture before, or me, are all accessible on the Kotlin Bank Slack, actually. And that is pretty much it. And if you want to find all those links, just Google Compose, you'll find all the resources. And that's my Twitter handle in case you want to follow me. So I don't tweet much, honestly.
Amazing, Anna-Chiara. I love that. Especially, I hadn't really realized how the extent to which you leaned into open source actually for the whole Compose. That's really, really amazing. Yeah, so we're going to move a little bit to Q&A. I might actually ask my own question first, and then I'll hop. I can see some questions coming in from the team. But as the kind of product manager for this kind of release, getting to stability must have been such an exciting journey. What has been your kind of favorite part? Maybe that working with the community or solving a particularly gritty problem. What has kind of been the highlight for you getting to 1.0?
The highlight is interesting. Thanks so much for asking this question. I have to say that since I have been an engineer most of my life, and my transition to a product manager is relatively recent. I'm talking about 3 years ago, which is not such a short time, but with respect to the rest, it is a bit shorter. It was difficult for me to find that adrenaline kick that as a developer you get so often when you solve a problem, while the work of a product manager is just a bit more drawn out. However, when I got to the point that we actually released 1.0 and I had some developers reach out to me, maybe privately on Slack or on Twitter, and saying, thank you. Compose is beautiful. Compose makes my life easier. That was really the highlight for me. That was the reward, because I know that we did something that, again, makes it easier for people to do their job and gives them this fun element and they just want to use it. And this is a product manager, like building a product that your users want to use and that they use just because they're having fun. Like we have seen, as soon as we released it with the first animations API, we have seen just tons of developers just making demo animations in Android, which was like unthinkable of before. It's like, okay, people are just having fun using it. And that's just the best reward ever as a product manager.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. And yeah, it seems like you've got such great feedback that you shared earlier as well about those kind of things from people using it. Amazing. Cool. We're going to move on to some questions from the audience. So we have Michael asking, I think it's a little bit more about the transition to Jetpack Compose. So is it possible to use both Compose with traditional XML-based views in the same app?
This is an amazing question, and probably I should have mentioned it in my presentation, but just I was mindful of space. The answer is absolutely yes. And for a bit of background, we knew that we couldn't ask everyone to just clean slate, delete your old app, write everything in Compose. That doesn't work. If you are an individual who has invested time in learning how to build for Android, if you are a company that has if you are a company that has invested in building for Android, it's we cannot just cut everything, right? So it has been one of the main goals of the Compose project to actually build something that was interoperable with views. The result is great. The interop is absolutely smooth. There is no extra layer of translation. You don't have to do any message passing. You can just use views inside a Compose screen. This happens a lot. Actually, we do it all the time because we haven't rewritten WebView, or there are some material components like the time picker that we haven't rewritten yet in Compose. So and you can just use them. There's plenty of samples to see how to use the interop, how to manage state in the different components, because obviously one is declarative, the other one is not declarative. So just the way you bind the data to the components is different. So, but there's plenty of samples. And so, yes, definitely.
Amazing. And maybe staying on that kind of topic, Anna-Chiara, like how would you suggest that people, maybe if they're building something themselves, or for example, they're maybe working with a client who is working with an Android, would it be kind of trialing it first and then taking it bit by bit, or what would you suggest is the best way forward?
So thanks for the question. We thought about this a long time, even before launching Compose. And really, especially one of our early messaging was like, adopt at your own pace. We still have that message. It's just that we have seen that people just take a much quicker pace than we expected. But it is absolutely the case that it is so easy to just add Compose in a very, very small part of your screen. That's what we have seen a lot of partners do, a lot of our developers do. Just adopt Compose in a very, very tiny part. So like one button, just try to use Compose, or a couple of components that just have some kind of funky transition, or some state that is a bit difficult to manage. Try those, see how it integrates with the rest. And then what we have seen is that once, oh, okay, that is actually very easy, we have seen companies basically operate in a very clear way. When they have to build a new feature, they will just use Compose. When they have to modify something, like change a feature on an existing screen, very often we have seen that as soon as they have confidence with Compose, instead of going and changing the existing screen, they will just rewrite it. But it's more opportunistic. So there is no need even to plan, and we don't advise to plan a whole rewrite of your app with Compose. You can totally do it incrementally. We expect that developers will have views in their apps for years, and that is totally perfect. So adopt at your own pace, try out in a small portion. Maybe we have seen a lot of companies just try maybe initially like in a toy internal app, do some kind of hackathon, and then just go full ahead. The exception to that is more about companies that have a whole UI design system rewrite. For any reason, they want to change their whole design system. And in that sense, then maybe it makes sense to write your whole new UI system in Compose, just because it's so much easier. We built it in a layered way to be able to support different UI systems and the one that we include, which is material design. So in that case, we would advise just to go with Compose if it's completely new.
Great, thank you. Amazing. So I actually have a couple of questions I'm going to bunch together for you, pretty much around future roadmap. So maybe more broadly, you could talk about what does the future of Compose look like? But I have two specific questions. So it is, will there be a way to customize screen transitions in the future? And is there any near-term plans to implement maps in Compose without using Android View? We can come back to those two specific ones, but maybe you want to talk more broadly about what's next for Compose.
So generally in Android, historically, we have been a bit careful about sharing roadmaps, and we have never done that. However, I can answer this question because we released just a month ago a public roadmap for Compose. And that roadmap doesn't have specific dates, but it tells everyone what is in focus and what is not in focus at the moment. So for instance, screen transitions are definitely in focus. It's something that we are working on. Improving performance, we actually have very, very good performance because we have targeted our development at 60 frames per second on lower end devices. But you can always do better. And so especially on large, complicated layouts, we're still working a bit on that. And another thing that for us, however, is super important, we are expanding Compose to just different surfaces in terms of larger screens, or I mentioned Chromebooks or Wear devices. We're thinking a lot about how do we support developers in their journey to tackle all of this. It takes a lot of time just to wrap your mind around, okay, how do I support a phone, a tablet, a foldable, and maybe a widget, or there's a lot, and the tendency is to think, okay, I just want to do it because I can't even think about all of that. And so we want to make it simple. We want to make it easy, even to support all of these different form factors. That is definitely something that is in focus for us. As for maps, at the moment, I wouldn't say we have plans for that. Eventually, we're going to be working on that. But at the moment, no. Maps work amazingly. It is obviously, they're very complicated. So yeah, I wouldn't say that's our first priority. But you can put in a request, but at some point, it's going to come.
Amazing. And in terms of that, that's great to hear that the roadmap is kind of live and kind of kicking up there. How did you go about, this is probably more of a product question, but like, how did you go about getting that community feedback and starting to think about that prioritization exercise? I think that would be really interesting.
That takes a lot. So the community feedback is interesting because we have a whole dedicated team, our developer relations team. Basically, their job is to interact with the Android community and both publish content, but also in the pre-pandemic world, it was all the live conferences, and so they would get the live feedback and they would get it back to us. However, we have been doing this in a pretty structured way as well. So we had an early access program, which was weird to call early access for something that was open source, but still we worked very closely with some partners, and so we got structured feedback like bi-weekly questionnaires and monthly feedback sessions just to dig out all what was important for them. And we have a few other forums that we use in a structured way to get this feedback. And then prioritization is a balance between what the community is asking, and also because we have to be careful because some developers are, depending maybe on even on their geographical location or their expertise, are going to ask for different things. And so even just because of the style of UI that is preferred in a specific region of the world, developers are going to ask for different things. So there's a balance in getting all the requests, making sure that you don't listen only to the loudest voice, that's the developers that you hear more frequently, but balancing that also with a general vision of where do we want to take the product, right? Because it's a pretty famous quote, and I hope I'm not misquoting it, but it was from Henry Ford, who said that if he had asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So it is our job, and Ford is the one that actually built the car. But for us, it's that mix of listening to what the community is asking and sometimes making big bets, big bold moves that maybe don't pay out dividends immediately, but prove their value over time. So it's about finding that balance. It's not easy.
Not easy at all, definitely not. I'm sure Henry Ford felt that way when he was building a car and people thought he was kind of crazy. But that's great to hear. Also a lot of ways that our developers in Andela could get involved and give feedback and kind of get part of that cycle. So that's really, really great.
And we would love to hear more.
Yeah, amazing. Always more. I mean, you're going to regret asking that because then there's more people like digging through. Amazing. Okay, so we're going to go to a question from Kennedy, which is really great about kind of, I guess, learning with Compose. So what's your opinion on the required experience level to get started with Compose? Do you think a beginner Android developer should start with Compose now?
That's an awesome question. So the question actually can be answered in two ways. One is beginner Android developer, but with experience on development, or beginner developer full stop. That's those are a bit two different words, right? It's does a developer already have expertise in just in general algorithms or in how an app can work or not? The good thing is that in both cases, the answer is yes. So you can start with Compose. We have and again, this is a bit of a shift in how it has traditionally been for Android. For Android, it seems, or at least we have received feedback that a lot of our tools or our documentation was targeted at developers who already had a certain level of experience, and it took time. Maybe you had to do a specific course or a lot of just basic learning and training just to get to understand how to write a simple Hello World app. The great thing with Compose is that actually an Hello World app is probably 10 lines of code, and it's just so easy that if you just download Android Studio, the most recent version like Arctic Fox, stable, and you start a Compose project, everything that you need to look at is in a single file, and it's again 20 lines of code just because we wrapped a couple of functions just to give it a bit of structure. It could even be smaller. So, and everything that you need is in there. And from there, it's just about playing around. We have built tools that allow you to preview immediately what is happening. So you don't need a device, you don't need to understand emulator, you don't need to understand API levels. Okay, oh, I need to create an emulator. What SDK do I support? Oh my God, API 21, 20, what do I do? What's the difference? To start with Compose, you don't need to learn anything of that. Mindful. At some point, you will need to learn all those things, okay? They are still important because Compose is UI. It doesn't eliminate that complexity. And if you want to be an expert Android developer, you need to understand that complexity if you want to understand the trade-offs and everything. However, Compose simplifies a lot, even the fragmentation, the UI fragmentation that you have on different devices, on different API levels, or different brand devices, which is usually a real struggle for Android developers. All of that is just erased with Compose because your UI is going to look the same on every device. So that is great. And so a beginner developer, I really hope that if it's not the case, Kennedy, ping me, like get on Slack, ping me, say like, no, I'm a beginner developer and I don't understand, please ping me. And I have to understand why, because it means I need to do my job right. There is one specific resource that I think can be very helpful, is the Compose tutorial. So if you go to the main Compose page, you will find it, or it's also linked in the pathway. it really goes step by step, and it shows you how a simple Compose app can work. So I think it should be really, really easy, really approachable. Really hope.
Amazing. You might get, hopefully you won't get too many DMs after this. No, sounds amazing. Great. So I think one other question, again, we'll maybe kind of broaden this out. We have got a question about the future of XML and Jetpack Compose together in parallel. But I guess that more broadly, it would be great to hear your thoughts on what's the future kind of Android development.
The future of Android development is Compose. We really hope that developers will find it as useful as we're seeing. So there is no reason as of today, when you start developing a UI, not to use Compose. I mean, maybe the only reason actually we have heard some companies are still a bit reluctant, and most is if they don't use Kotlin, if for any reason the company hasn't adopted Kotlin, Compose is not available for Java. It relies so heavily on Kotlin language features that it wouldn't be possible to use Compose from Java. The opposite is possible because Kotlin is interoperable with Java, but to use Compose, you need to understand Kotlin and you need to use Kotlin. So that is the one reason I know that can stop adoption. Another one that we have heard was, oh, but the team doesn't know Compose. But also we have heard from teams that were very skeptical at the beginning. They said, oh, we have never seen a technology being adopted this fast. So we really hope that that takes down a barrier, right? So the future is definitely Compose. There is really, again, no reason to invest heavily in views. Plus, if you try, you just will not want to do that. However, the question says, will XML get deprecated? That's a long way ahead. That's a long, I cannot even say if it's ever going to happen, right? Like Android has always supported backward compatibility. So it is not something that is, no one should worry about their views code or their XML code. Really, no one should worry about it. It is supported, it is going to work. So it's maybe in the future, it's a long future ahead. We haven't even talked about it.
Amazing, very definitive. Amazing. Great. Well, we have maybe time for one last question. I'd like to possibly steer in a slightly different direction away from Compose and onto you, Anna-Chiara, because I know we have a lot of developers in the audience, a lot of kind of aspiring developers, people who are learning how to code. I know a lot of the questions that we get from the Andela community and from people who are interested in joining Andela is also around product management. And so really keen to get your 2 cents in the last few minutes that we have about making that shift, how you made that shift from, you know, very technical and hands-on developer to kind of more product focused, and how do you find that?
Yeah, it's been challenging. Let me tell you, let me start by saying that it's been challenging and rewarding. So as I said at the beginning, like I've been a backend developer for really over 20 years. Then at some point, I felt like I had written Hello World in 100 ways, and I was no longer interested in learning the 101st. Sure, it could be exciting, but I was not so curious about learning something new. As a developer, that is a bit of a challenge, right? You always have to keep up with what's going on. And in general, I think that maybe after 20 years of doing the same job, it can be a good idea to do something new, right? Our careers are all going to be very long. If you think you start working, I started working when I was around 18, and you can't, and I don't know when I'm going to ever retire, but what I know is that doing for 50 or 60 years the same job is probably not what appeals to me. So it was time for a change. I was a manager in a company for a while in a startup. So in startup, things move slightly quicker than in more formal companies. And then I founded my own startup where I was the CTO. I was writing a lot of code, but I was also the CTO of a company. So the transition actually happened in a, I want to say serendipitous way, but it's not really serendipity when you have been working at that all your life, right? It's just at some point the occasion came that a recruiter contacted me and said, hey, startup CTOs, in our experience, make good product managers. If you want to talk about it, sure. and that's how actually I got into the interview process at Google. And it seemed a great opportunity because I was looking for that kind of change. Again, I had just wrote too much code in my life. I still love it, but I was no longer in for the very long nights. And there has been an adjustment period that has been challenging for me. There are a few things as a developer you're used to. I'll say two things specifically. One, you are used to short time and exact feedback. Your code works or it doesn't. Maybe it works and it has bugs, I know, but it works. There is an exact answer. You have an algorithm and your algorithm is right or it's wrong. It's not a gray area science. And which is great. If you ever read or listened to anything by Mihai, well, I can't pronounce that name, the Hungarian psychologist, Csikszentmihalyi, something like that. The author of Flow, basically. Coding is the perfect autotelic experience. Gives you quick feedback, you're focused into what you're doing, you just get that, it's amazing. It just gives you that kick of adrenaline. As a product manager, everything is great, everything. There is never a right or wrong answer. Everything is compromised, everything is trade-off. And most of all, the biggest challenge is that that reward cycle is very diluted. It came after 2 years, like the big reward came after 2.5 years of work. I'm definitely not used to that. I was definitely not used to that. And it has been a struggle. I have really struggled to find where do I get that reward in my day-to-day job. So, and most of all, like, you work with people, you don't work with code. That's the big difference. It's not you and your computer. It's not, you don't write code. You work with people. You have to convince people, not a computer, to do things. It's really a different job. It's really a different job.
So you'd maybe say getting comfortable with ambiguity would be good, and kind of like knowing that the payoff at the end is possibly kind of like a bigger shot at the end, right?
Yes. And it's just very different. There is an adaptation period, and luckily for me, I love it. I really enjoy working with people. I think it really calls onto my side. When I was teacher, when I was just collaborating more with people, that's something I have always loved. So it's, but it was not the majority of my work. So it's been challenging. However, I really love it.
Oh, amazing, Anna-Chiara. Great. Well, we're gonna leave it there. Unfortunately, we're at time, but I just want to say thank you for that amazing presentation, all your insights, and for answering all of our questions. That's been really, really great. And I know that hopefully a lot of Andela developers will take a lot of advantage of Compose into the future. Maybe reach out to you on your Slack instance. You never know.
Please do. Like, I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys on our Slack, and just get in touch with us and see how it's going for you.
Amazing. I think just to cap it off, I want to end with a comment that someone has actually sent to us, which is that it's interesting how many times we have mentioned feedback in this talk. And if we were to do a word cloud, that would probably come up to the top. So really, really great to see the importance of that in our day-to-day work. Thank you, Anna-Chiara, again, for an amazing talk. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm really excited to see you next time at our online technical workshops. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.